Question. And this has to do, again, you've sort of touched on some of this, but let me put the question out there regarding infrastructure. If you take a look at the city right now, and we've had some comments about, you know, the condition of our roads, et cetera, et cetera. From your point of view, what specific infrastructure projects need to receive high priority, and how would you pay for them? And which are ones that you think could in fact be deferred? Okay, and according to my list here, Dawn, you're up next.
Okay, great. You're right, Michael. There's definitely been a reduction in infrastructure maintenance over the years as part of the cost cutting. You know, HR Green did a report. They identified 4 categories of infrastructure. There was safety, regulatory, preventive maintenance, and best practices. And the safety and regulatory categories together represent $6.7 million over 5 years. So that's a little over $1 million a year that currently just doesn't exist in the budget. The report for me is a starting point. I haven't gone in depth into it, but it really needs to be validated by the Public Works Director to make sure that items are correctly classified and that there's data or reports that support the need for the projects and what is truly urgent versus, you know, just something that would be good to do, and are the costs reasonable rather than gross assumptions. So I would support developing a plan for truly urgent needs. For me, that would be something that represents a safety risk or might put us in some kind of regulatory or legal risk based on an assessment from our attorney. But you know, that is just one piece of the plan. As I said earlier, we need to take that into the context of all of the city's needs and then figure out, what do we need? What money do we have? How do we bridge the gap? But that would be the way that I would approach it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Gayne?
So about infrastructure, what Dawn is saying about the money, it's 6.7 for safety and regulatory. I was thinking, or came across a report that mentioned $20 million approximately for infrastructure over the next 10 years. Yeah. That's a lot of money, actually. And I don't think that even included best practices. So it really would be higher than that. Clearly, safety has to be number one, and we get actually back to liability issues with buildings or with roadways or with other liability issues with fire, maybe, whatever would come up if a building was more fire prone or they earthquake prone, et cetera, those kind of liability issues. In addition to liability issues on our roadways, we are really open to big liability issues there. Malaga Cove did their study in 2017. It was published by PVRRG on 2018 regarding roadway safety. And 70% of the people responding in that survey said that was a big issue for them, roadway safety, that there was lack of enforcement for safety issues on the roadway. So I'm absolutely for number one, safety. But again, we've run out of money. That's a lot of money. We got to get the money someplace. And if we're paying the unfunded pensions or doing some of the things that the pension ad hoc committee might recommend, we then escalated that amount of money and crowded out these other services. Unfortunately, I think infrastructure takes the back burner in terms of the money. We really need to bring it more forward to the front burner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bill?
Well, Dawn mentioned the HR Green report, which is the capital improvement plan. I reviewed that. I don't think it's a plan. I agree with Dawn. It's a starting point. We did a project up in San Francisco for the San Francisco airport back before I retired, and we had a similar issue with a lot of infrastructure that needed to be upgraded, needed to be fixed, and we had a limited amount of money. So we wanted to see, well, how exactly do we do it? So we put together a group and we came up with an infrastructure strategic implementation plan. And we sat down with stakeholders, We looked at the list of projects. We defined roles and responsibilities for stakeholders in identifying elements of the plan. And then we prioritized what things needed to be done now. And the majority of those were safety, but not all were safety. Some of the safety things took we're down in level 2. But anyway, we put together a plan. You can draw a line and say, all right, these are the things we're going to get accomplished. Everything above the line gets done now because that's the money we have. If you save money, other things can come up above the line. If you run into unforeseen circumstances and you're not efficient enough, things can drop below the line. But I think that's what we need to do, and that will give council also kind of a roadmap for funding and putting together our long-term financial plan.
Okay, Jim?
So, as others have mentioned, I think the HR Green study is definitely not a plan. I've watched the Finance Advisory Committee kind of try to wrestle with how to build that into their model. They, as others have mentioned, break it into these three big categories, and I feel very strongly that that the devil is really in the details on that. And I don't know that we can just lump, millions of dollars worth of potential projects into 3 broad categories and then create a policy around that. So when I've looked through some of the details, I'm sure that HR Green is staffed with people who are well versed in public works projects and what it costs to complete them. But and I'm certainly not an expert in that regard, but there were things in there that I couldn't understand. For example, they had, I think, maybe $300,000 to replace the sewer lateral that serves City Hall. I can't imagine how that is possibly true. And so I would guess that digging into more of the details there, we'd find that there's a lot of projects there that aren't necessary or that are estimated quite a bit higher than they need to be. In general, my response to the HR Green study is that it is an interesting set of data points. It is not a cause for crisis level concern. I think the pension issue is more substantial and deserves more of the council's attention in the near term.
Okay.